Hello everyone and welcome. We are so glad you could join us for today's webinar. Whether you're tuning in live or watching the replay, we know that your time is valuable and we are excited to spend the next 30 minutes with you diving into the topic that's essential for any institution planning a website redesign or a digital project, writing a better website RFP. Your RFP sets the tone for the entire project. A clear, thoughtful RFP can save months of frustration, reduce back and forth, and help you attract the right partners who truly understand your goals. So if you're tired of generic responses or projects going off track, this session is for you. You'll hear from Sandra Fancher, Chief Innovation Officer here at Stamats, and Kat Liendgens, CEO at Hannon Hill. Together, they've reviewed more than 1,500 RFPs, and today they share real examples, practical tips, and common pitfalls to avoid going forward. You'll walk away with a clearer idea on how to write an RFP to get the better results and save time and money and stress in the process. And yes, you'll receive a copy of the recording and helpful resources in the upcoming days. And with that, let's get started.
Thank you, Chris. So Stamats is a comprehensive digital marketing, brand development, and creative company. Our primary focus is the experience and results. We're based in Cedar Rapids, and we've been family-owned for over 100 years.
And I'm with Hannon Hill. We're the makers of Cascade CMS and the Clive personalization platform. Our focus is to help higher education improve the effectiveness of their websites. And we are located in Atlanta, Georgia.
So what qualifies Kat and I? Together, we have read over 1,500 RFPs. We have read a lot of RFPs, and so we've seen what has worked and not worked. So why do RFPs matter? So an RFP is like a roadmap for your project. It also tells the vendors like us what you want and how to respond. If you have a clear RFP, you're going to have fewer questions and a faster timeline, and those vague RFPs can generate a lot of questions. So there are many reasons to generate an RFP. I mean, obviously, there's just the procurement requirements that you're required to generate an RFP. But normally, it's like you do not have a partner. There's some mandatory renewal period for existing relationship, or you're just looking for a whole new partner. So before we get started, I want to share some 3 key stats. I pulled these numbers from last year, RFPs and RFPs that were sunshined, so not just ones that we worked on. The average number of questions from vendors in an RFP is 122. The highest number was 382. And 15% of RFPs were canceled in a year. And that was usually after they went around and around through all those questions. So it can make for a lot of work for everyone if you have a poor RFP. And the outcome might not be exactly what you want. So common frustrations I hear at conferences, and actually I was at a conference last week, hearing about different website projects. Number one, I didn't understand the PM support required. So I didn't ask enough about the project management, what the status calls would be like, how they're going to help me move through the system. Number two, I underestimated the governance support needed. And with governance can go change management, needing help understanding just how to get approvals, how to work through the content, and just how to lay out the workflow. Number 3, I thought moving content would be easier than it is. This is probably actually the number one, but yeah, we're going to talk a lot about content today, but it is always a lot more work than you think it is. And number 4, I didn't ask enough questions about the back-end structure. I didn't understand enough about maybe how shared content works, or how security works, or how workflow works. Number 5, my vendor didn't actually know the CMS that well, and they kind of hard-coded the site. It wasn't built in a flexible way, and now they were stuck with something that was really tedious to make any updates. And number 6, I underestimated the vendor's appreciation for higher ed and just understanding the terminology and their ability to properly interview and interact with the different departments at the school. So we have some things for you before you start your RFP. Number 1, you really should take an inventory with a crawler. So you should have a report of every page on your site. You run that crawl, it finds everything, pages, PDFs, other documents. We use Screaming Frog. That is a paid license, but there are some free options that I have listed there. But also you can talk with your server people. But you really want to make sure you get that inventory and you figure out how many pages you have that you're dealing with. Kat?
Yeah, so before releasing an RFP, it's very important to take a step back and make sure that you fully understand your functionality needs. So don't just include broad terms or buzzwords, but instead be as specific as you can. Because we often see requirements like the example that you see on the slide where the RFP says something like, oh, the vendor should integrate with X, Y, Z, etc. But what does that actually mean? An integration really can be anything from adding a simple link to building a deep automated connection that syncs data between different systems. So that could mean hundreds of hours of custom development or just a few minutes of setup. So before you list something like integrations, clarify what it is that you really need. So ask what information needs to flow between the systems and how often, in which direction. And so that level of detail will help vendors provide accurate proposals and save you a lot of time and headaches later in the process. Now, another one of these vague words that we see all the time is seamless. And it sounds great, right? Who doesn't want the seamless integration? But the problem is it doesn't really mean anything specific. Every vendor's definition of seamless is different. So for one, it might mean single sign-on. For another vendor, it might mean a deep API connection with data syncing both ways. So instead of saying ensure seamless integration, describe what it is that you're really looking for. And so the more you can define what seamless actually means in your context, the easier it will be for vendors to give you an accurate response and for you to get what you really need.
Yes. And third, know your content resources. Not all writers are web writers. And knowing the CMS is not enough to be a writer. They need to know accessibility, they need to know search engine optimization, especially now with AI and AI searches, they need to know readability. And they have to have the ability to write persuasive content. This is not catalog content. We are marketing and we are recruiting prospective students. So as we talk a little bit more about planning for content, here is a starting formula. So on average, you have about 30% of your content that might need to be new. Now we're talking about a brand new site, not maybe a site that you're just shifting to a new CMS or shifting a new redesign. But if you have one of those, sites that really needs attention, you probably need about 30% new content. That's usually your program content. That's admissions and financial aid and maybe some of your key student resources pages. Those pages take about 6 to 8 hours, not all at once, but by the time you're doing interviews, you're writing, you're doing your revisions, you're finding quotes, you're finding images, and you're getting them all ready. The average, and I have tested this over 20 years, and it's 6 to 8 hours, even having AI do some prep work for us. And then we have optimized content. That's about 40% of your content. That's about 1 to 3 hours. You're optimizing that content for SEO, adding in headlines, formatting it for better scannability and reading, inserting those calls to action, connecting that content to other pages. And then we have kind of as is content, that's 30%, news, events, bios, any of the other type of content. So using this information, you can start with a formula. How many writers do you have? How many hours per week can those writers give you? So if I have 2 writers and they can give me 30 hours per week, obviously it's 60 hours. If I have 100 new pages needed, and that's 6. So I'm picking the lower number, 6 to 8 hours per page. That's 600 hours just for the new pages. And I'm pretty sure most sites are a little bit more than 100 pages. So that's 10 weeks just for the new content. So think through that, think through who you have, think through, again, you've done your inventory. So now you can kind of figure out how many pages you might need to do, and you can start that prep work. But you can also maybe be creative. We do not see a lot of kind of options in RFPs. It's either write the content or not, but maybe you could ask for something else. Could you consider content coaching to upskill your team? Your team is going to do it. And it's more than just, hey, can you give us a writing for the web training? Actually, can you meet with us once a week to get us started? Could you review our content for the first 20 pages per writer and actually upskill us? That way your team can learn while you're doing the project. Or maybe you have kind of a team of people who can migrate content, but managing that team and all their daily questions is maybe too much work for your team to take on. Maybe you have in your RFP different options for migration PM. What happens if the vendor could provide just the PM for the migration and not have to do it all? And that way you could look at other resources. But again, be creative with maybe how you can handle all this content. So over the years, on average, and this again, not just at Stamats, because I do the sunshine, about 40% of projects add unbudgeted content support during the project. So if you want to avoid having to go back and ask for that content, put that in. And, maybe you put it in and you get approval, but you don't release that budget to the vendor, but you keep that in your back pocket that you already have it approved so that you can get support. That way you're not having to go back to your boss or leadership or the board to ask for additional money. That's kind of a nice thing to do, that you can just keep it there for yourself. All right, some RFP mistakes to avoid. Again, I know we keep talking about this, but it's all about the content. We see a lot where they just assume content can just be imported. And again, if up at the top when I talked about the frustrations, this is one. They're like, well, I just thought it would be a lot easier, but most content cannot be imported, and that's because the new design elements aren't going to align with your current content, and you're going to miss an opportunity to optimize that content, and you're losing out on all those new design features. So let me show you. So here's Hawkeye Community College and their welding diploma. Their website just won gold last week at NCMPR. So very proud of this site. But here you see this content with the body copy going, kind of straight down. Here's their new design. A heading, career ready in 1 year. We've got our at a glance, your welding career, and then the Hawkeye difference. The content on the left isn't going to just magically move into the new elements on the right. And even if you did write a script to do that, you'd spend so much time scripting every page. You definitely could have just migrated it faster and cleaner. So here's another example, the Kirkwood Golf Course. So this page, moving into their new page, we even used the same photo, but you can see we had to get a larger size. That content on the left, even though a lot of it is the same through the classroom and extensive lab experiences, that same paragraph, it doesn't just move into all the right things. You don't get those highlights, the scholarships, what you'll learn in program into those tabs dynamically. It just won't flow in there for you. And University of North Carolina, Wilmington, the transfer admissions. So one of the things I want to highlight here is, if I move my mouse, is how do I apply, is in the body copy. Over here, we have a call out for that. How do I apply? Again, that script or that automation is not going to take advantage. This takes kind of human to read it and go, oh, there's the apply. I'm going to pull this out and put this in here. In the future, maybe the scripts are going to get a lot better, but otherwise it just takes a lot of extra time. And again, you want to take these links, put them over here, put some more application deadlines. You want to design the page using the new elements. So again, best for scripting is bios, news items, directories, any of those types of things. The next piece is scorecard ranking. Sometimes we'll see that in the RFP that they're going to select a vendor based solely on their RFP response without having direct contact with them. We really do feel that the project is a lot about the relationship and how you're going to work together and meeting the team. And are you a fit? Do you work together in the same way? Do you communicate in the same way? Because a lot of times I'll hear at conferences that the frustration was the communication. And a lot of that could be avoided if they had personal interviews with the vendor. And then third, the CMS selection, kind of letting the vendor select the CMS. I'll see this, it'll be like, whoever you recommend. Well, based on the vendor, they might have a preferred platform that might not be the best platform for you. So you really should kind of do your demos. You should dig in. You should understand them. You can still let the vendor make a recommendation. You can still let the vendor give feedback based on all the different CMSs that they know and what you know, but letting them come in the RFP and saying, this is the one. You are making two big decisions in that RFP, both your CMS that you will live with hopefully for a very long time and your vendor. So we have seen, selecting a vendor, if you say, well, this is the one I'm going to pick, selecting a vendor that's unfamiliar with the CMS, and they have to build that. They end up, of course, wanting that job, and so they'll build it. But if you don't fully understand all those components and how they work together, how personalization works together, which Kat's going to talk about, you don't actually get a site that is leveraging that CMS. So what does make an RFP great, since we've been talking about all the other things? Again, that content considerations, you've estimated the number of pages, you've clarified who owns the content. Is it centralized or distributed? That will actually make a difference in their plan. Have you done a content audit? And if you could share that, that would be great. How do you want your content to be structured? And then how much new content do you think is needed? And if you don't know, just state that. And then this is one that often gets missed. What subsites are included or not included? List those URLs specifically in your RFP. All right, Kat?
So one of the most important things that you can do before writing an RFP is to be crystal clear about your goals, as I mentioned before. So always ask yourself, what are we actually trying to achieve with this project? Is it increasing applications and enrollment, improving retention, driving more donations, and maybe it's all of the above, but be specific about how you will measure success. And then also think about your audiences. Who are you trying to reach? Is it primarily prospective students? And in which case, what type of prospective students? Maybe current students, parents, alumni, you got faculty, community partners. So each of these groups has very different needs, and your RFP should ideally reflect that. And don't forget about your internal users either, because the people who actually be creating and maintaining content, they also need to be taken into consideration. So knowing who they are, knowing what their skill levels are, and how they will use the system will help ensure that the solution that you choose actually works for everyone. Now, let's shift gears into the CMS side of the RFP, because this is where things often get either too vague or too complicated. So let's get started here. So start by naming your current CMS and also explaining why you're even considering a change. So what's not working well today? What do you wish that you could do that you currently can't? Because that kind of context really helps vendors recommend solutions that truly fit your needs instead of just checking some feature boxes. And if you anticipate any customizations, call them out early. So for example, do you need a custom workflow for content approvals or integrations with a specific system or something unique to your institution? So the earlier you surface those details, the more accurate your proposals will be. So again, be specific about your goals and not just the features that you want. So for instance, maybe you want to reduce the number of help tickets coming into your CMS team, or you want to improve content freshness, or maybe strengthen accessibility and web governance. So those are all measurable outcomes that vendors can design around. And then finally, talk about your team and the kind of support you'll need. So how many people are involved in content management? What are their roles? Will you need training, implementation help, or post-launch support? So be clear about your expectations, whether that's live support, a dedicated customer success manager, or some guaranteed response times, because these details can help you identify which vendors are truly a long-term fit for you. So in short, don't just ask what the CMS can do, ask how it will support your goals and your people as well. So one of the biggest recommendations is to always insist on live demonstrations, as Sandra already mentioned. So a live demo that is tailored to your use cases is the best way to see whether a CMS will actually work for your team. Because really, a feature checklist can only tell you so much. The real test is watching how your staff would actually create, edit, and publish a page. And that's when the truth comes out. So if it's important to you that your team can create a new page from scratch, then simply ask the vendor to walk you through that process from start to finish. And also make sure that you get clarity around implementation. So how many unique page types will they set up for you? Will they help you build out all of your templates, or will they just hand you one generic one and walk away? And then content migration is another area where expectations can easily get misaligned. So again, don't just assume that it's a copy and paste job. Is this a full migration, a partial one? Is it just templates? So who's handling the rewrites? Are there accessibility or tagging issues to fix along the way? And then also remember, not all migrations are created equal. I cannot stress this enough, because moving structured content is very, very different from wrangling hundreds of unstructured WYSIWYG pages. And some vendors, yeah, they will just dump everything into one big page type. But that means for you that you'll end up rebuilding components and layouts later. And that can often take months and sometimes even years after launch. And you don't want to have that situation happen to you. And then finally, talk about your future plans, not just what's needed immediately. So for example, if personalization is on your roadmap for your digital strategy, that's actually a perfect example, because structured content is absolutely key to making personalization possible down the line. So plan for this type of thing early. Now, we already talked a little bit about integrations, but I want to stress this a little bit further here, because it's one of those vague areas that show up in almost every single RFP. And again, we see this all the time. CMS should integrate with XYZ without giving the details. So again, the type of detail that a vendor needs is exactly what you're looking for. Are you looking to pull information from another system into the CMS and then create content from it? Or do you want that information to appear dynamically on your website without even going to the CMS at all? Or maybe it's the other way around. You need to push information from the CMS to another system. And if that's the case, is this going to be a one-way or two-way sync? How often should it update? Should it be maybe just once, or maybe nightly, or in real time? And all these details can make a big, big difference. And without those details, vendors really are left to make assumptions. And that's never a good thing for RFP responses. That's how you end up with huge discrepancies in proposals, in costs, and in expectations. So again, when you talk about integration, don't just name the systems, but be clear about what you need these systems to essentially do together. So I have an avoid slide as well here. So here are a few things to absolutely avoid in your RFP. And the first line is the classic must integrate with CRM. But then you don't name which CRM that is or what exactly the integration would accomplish. And that is a surefire way to get confusing bids, because vendors are just left guessing and they just do the best they can. Next is the word user-friendly. User-friendly for whom? User-friendly for a marketing intern, a dean, a faculty member. So be specific about your users and their needs, because what's intuitive for one group might be completely confusing for another group. And then, of course, there's the, what I call the laundry list problem. So things like must support 20 file types or must be open source and SaaS. So these kind of blanket requirements usually don't reflect what you actually need, and it can just muddy the waters. And here's my big plea. Please don't copy and paste a giant feature list from other RFPs. And in some cases, I've seen multiple RFPs together. This might look thorough, but it actually signals to vendors that you're not really clear on your goals. So the best RFPs that I've seen are the ones that reflect your own priorities and content. And then finally, I know it's super tempting to ask vendors about their product roadmap, and there's really nothing wrong with this. Please, you can do that, and every vendor will be happy to share. But I would say don't make a decision based on promised features in the future, because truly anybody can promise you the moon. So focus on what exists today and how it solves your real problems. So let's talk about some of the gotchas when it comes to site build. Actually, I also just came back from a conference, which was the Digital Collegium Conference, where personalization and AI were two of the hottest topics, hands down. And pretty much everybody agreed that personalization really isn't optional anymore. It's your lifeline, especially with the enrollment cliff, with funding challenges, and with growing competition for a smaller pool of students. So the consensus was personalization works, but only if you plan for it from the start. So if your content isn't implemented in a structured way, it actually becomes much harder and much more expensive to personalize later on. So in your RFP, I would say share your key personas and your audience segments, and then that will set you up for success. So if personalization is part of your strategy, and it really should be, if you ask me, then make sure that you articulate that early on. And then finally, make sure that you're working with vendors who structure content properly. I mentioned this before, and not just dump everything into one big WYSIWYG blob, because structured content is what makes real personalization possible and effective. Now, most of you have a lot of different content contributors with very different technical skills and different responsibilities. And we're actually seeing more institutions move towards more of a centralized model. But to be fair, that's not always scalable. Because if I were you, I would think, do I really want to have my marketing experts update faculty bios and course descriptions? Maybe not. So instead, you want the right workflows in place. So those workflows that let contributors update the content that they're responsible for while still protecting your brand and also ensuring quality control. So that's where planning ahead makes a huge difference. So think about who your contributors are, what their skill set looks like, and what your ideal approval process would look like. And then spell that out in your RFP. Because when vendors understand your workflow expectations up front, they can design a CMS setup that supports it perfectly so you don't end up reinventing your processes after launch.
Great. So as we wrap up here, the three biggest factors that will impact the cost of a project. Number one is the amount of content that you need help with, both writing and migrating. Number two, any technical integrations, and again, not just links, as Kat had talked about. So if you need a lot of technical integrations. And then number three, really the complexity of the client team, which it's why it's important to understand that, how many additional meetings do you need? How many additional interviews or support? So consider those as you're thinking about the price. And honestly the type of vendor you need. If you are simply moving things over and you do not need to rewrite content and you don't need change management, you might need a different type of vendor than if you have a lot of content support, you have a lot of change management. You are moving from multiple sites into one, and you need that coaching. So think about that as you select the vendor. We often get asked, is there a recommended timeline? And ideally, it really is less than a year from the time that you kick off. If you can't make a year, consider some phases. Get the success of that new site up and running right away as fast as possible. But if you do your pre-work, less than a year should be doable. After that, you start to lose some momentum. And again, you're not taking advantage of all those wonderful new features. The academic calendars make dates a bit harder in higher ed. So missing a date could mean moving it out to the next cycle a couple of extra months. So do kind of plan for about a year. We do see in RFPs where they'll say, we're going live on this date, but then the RFP ends up taking them way longer than the RFP timeline. So maybe instead of putting a specific date, say estimate a year, unless that date is super important. If it is, hold your vendor accountable to that date and to yourself. And then one last note, please consider going green. Sometimes there'll be RFP requests for multiple copies that are bound and shipped. And just doing a little bit of research, last year, digital RFPs saved 2 tons of paper, which equal 8 blue whales, just to kind of give a context. Over 28,000 trees were not cut down, 23 million gallons of water, and of course, less carbon dioxide. So please consider that allowing for a digital RFP in your process.
And that's a wrap for our session. Thank you everyone for joining us today. A big thank you to Sandra Fancher and Kat Liendgens for sharing such great, clear, actionable insights. Before you go, don't forget to grab the free RFP template shown on the screen right here. It's tailored specifically for higher ed institutions and will help you kick off your next website project with clarity and confidence. Just scan the QR code or click the downloadable link when the recording lands in your inbox. And if you're planning a website redesign or just exploring next steps, we are here to help you. You can reach out to us anytime at info@staymates.com. That is info@staymates.com. And if you're in your market for CMS, be sure to visit hannonhill.com to learn more. Thank you again, and we look forward to staying connected.